For the panel, yeah, Paul.
Chris. Oh, there's Chris.
Chris. Oh, well, Paul then.
And Paul, yeah.
Chris has a goatee. I like it.
Yeah.
Who?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Clean up nice.
My mom hates it. She says I'm going native and I should stop.
Well, you can't have your regular barber come in to shave you every day anymore.
They want me to shave myself? I mean, really?
What's the world coming to?
Whoop. Oh, what happened to the screen?
Gary has shared his screen, so we're seeing the introduction slide there.
Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Can you see the
Thank
slide?
you, Carlos.
We do see
Okay.
it.
Good. So that's so as people come in, they'll know they're in the right place.
Okay. Hi, Cleo.
Hey, how you doing, Carlos?
I'm doing all right.
Good, good.
How about you?
I've been doing okay. Like all of us, we're waiting.
Yeah.
Patiently, very patiently.
Yep.
Waiting for Godot? Who are you waiting for?
Say that again?
Are you waiting for Godot? Who are you waiting for?
I'm waiting for this epidemic to be over
Hmm.
and the president to shut his mouth.
Yeah.
I won't even listen to him. Haven't for a long time, but now I won't even go there.
Yeah, I've taken like over a week break from TV for the most part. It's really helpful.
Right.
A little All in the Family late at night, I have to admit to that.
Karen, oh, I have to unmute myself just a minute. Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you can mute me later. So Terry and I started back watching House of Cards because we'd watched all 6 seasons.
Oh, gee.
And, you know, those shows, you don't figure out what's happening until it's all over. So, well, we'll just start over and figure it out again.
Yeah. Yeah, I lost it around the 4th season, somewhere in there. I don't know. I was watching it when I traveled. Well,
So why don't we give people 2 more minutes to jump on the meeting?
okay.
I see people are still coming in.
Could you
And
show the
then-
agenda really quickly?
Yeah.
Or no, if you don't want to, that's okay.
We're going to go over the agenda in a minute.
Okay, never mind then.
Well, while we're waiting for people, I have a question that I don't know if anybody's going to be able to answer. And I'd like to know why the Colorado Democratic Party decided that all these people running for at-large delegates were now being turned over to Biden.
My understanding is that's national party rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Bernie did not drop out of the race. He suspended. He did
Right.
not drop out. I don't see how they can do that with him not formally leaving. He suspended. There's a difference.
Well, but there's a rule about that, Cleo. We all looked it up, and it's definitely a rule.
And I think that's why we need to send delegates to the convention to fix the rules.
Well, my question is, I'm running at large, and I don't even know if I should withdraw because there's no way I'm going to spend money to go to convention to support Biden.
Yeah, you can't run at large anymore.
Can't.
If you're a Sanders
I
delegate.
can't. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I can run at large.
Cannot.
Right, or PLEO. Only
Okay.
CD now.
Okay. Well, that
Colorado.
fixes that one.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
So
I appreciate it.
our panelists are starting to join us, so I think we probably should formally start the meeting. Derek, turn it over to you.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us for our Revolution Metro Denver annual membership meeting. we're getting together today to have a panel with some of our elected officials and our activists to talk about this crisis and what we can do to what we can do about it, how we can help them help us, and how we build power here at our revolution. So we're going to have on the agenda, this is the introduction. Welcome. We're going to have a panel discussion, and then we're going to talk about why Bernie still needs delegates. We'll talk about our revolution's plans for down ballot endorsing, and then we'll close it up. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Owen, who's going to do the panel.
So thank you, Derek. I'm just finishing a text to Paul Cashman. Is Paul here? I don't see him.
I don't think he's joined yet, but we probably should get
Okay.
started.
Yeah, that's fine. So I just texted him to remind him, but yeah, thanks. So we're gonna get into a panel discussion now with the 4 people represented on the screen there. And, you know, our initial goal was to talk about the progressive agenda for Denver and how this exciting council can help move that progressive agenda forward. We clearly need to adjust our focus a little bit because of the present circumstances and look at how those progressive priorities and how our priorities in general in Denver and through city council and through our government wing and our activist wing, how we deal with our progressive agenda in the midst of the coronavirus crisis. So we've got with us participating today in order of council. I hope everybody's right on here. I think they are. But Paul Cashman, who's not with us yet, who's been on council since 2015, represents House District 6, and has been, you know, a great champion for a lot of the issues that we care so much about. He's been right in line with us, as I think our whole panel has been for the most part. Paul won an open seat in 2015 and is in his 2nd term now. We've got Candy C. DeBaca representing Council District 9. And Candy won a very exciting race last year. And I will mention that Candy was also one of the champions of the Democracy for the People Act. And, you know, part of a wave that we had hoped would be running under those rules. But despite not having the rules in place yet, she ran a fantastic race against an entrenched incumbent who I can't remember if he outspent her 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, but she won the day and has been, you know, a dynamic force to bring to our city and to bring a new perspective and to challenge the status quo. So we couldn't be happier than to have somebody like Candy on city council. And then we've got Chris Hines. You know, I think all of our guests share these same qualities. Chris has been a longtime activist in the area and has been, you know, was elected in 2019 also. Also beat an incumbent. So we have 2 people here who unseated incumbents, and that's incredibly rare in Denver. But Chris defeated a seated incumbent, brought in, you know, really flipped a district in a way. Flipping is different in a nonpartisan race, but I think we can consider it flipped. And you know, Chris is somebody who's been active and been pushing legislation and making legislation pass before he ever got into city council. So it's exciting to have him there now and to see how much more he does with that position on the city council. And then we've got another great champion. All these folks are people we endorsed in our revolution, Metro Denver, and Tony Pigford, who ran last year in a very tough at-large race, a crowded field with 2 incumbents, running for the 2 seats among the other candidates. And the 2 incumbents held their seats, but Tony did a fantastic job, came in a strong third, lots of votes. I can't remember the number. I know he does, but I have it in my mind. But it was a huge mobilization of support for somebody like Tony, who's been very active, has a background working in education, but very socially active and conscious, and has been a leading voice in our community from before the campaign, during the campaign, and after the campaign. So it's great to have all 4 of you here. And what we want to do is start off with you taking 2 to 3 minutes, and if it's closer to 2, that's great, to talk about, from your perspective, where you are. What happened there? Is that just me? I lost the screen. I'm back. Where, your perspective on that kind of 2-part question of the progressive agenda, how we're moving in Denver, but how we have to adapt in the time of coronavirus, and how that's changing how you're going about your job, what you're able to do in council, how we can be involved. So that whole kind of big gamut as an opening smorgasbord for you to feast on and share with us. So I'm just going to go in the order I see people on my screen, and I see Candy first.
Oh, well, thank you. This one is, it's an interesting time right now, because I think it's definitely true that it often takes an incredible crisis like this to really prove crazy people like me right. We've been fighting for the marginalized for such a long time, and some really basic needs and budget shifts since before COVID. And now with COVID, it has only really highlighted why we should have made these changes from the beginning. So I think that while it is a time that is very tough for all of us, it's forcing us to recalibrate and really decide what kind of city we want to be. And we had a lot of movement getting to this place. All those awesome things you talked about, Owen, were leading us to the place that we're in right now. There was desire to shift the way things are going. Now we don't have a choice. We have to shift our priorities. We have to shift the way that we're doing our budget. And so I see a lot of possibility in the time that we're in. I'm very hopeful and excited about what can come from this. But I think the thing that it's going to really take is some accountability, voter and resident accountability of this government. What I've watched, even with this crisis, is that imbalance of power that we talked about at the very beginning of our races, that heavy mayoral city, it's translated during the crisis. And we haven't had an opportunity for real collaboration or thought partnering during the planning in this situation. And so for me, I think that I need help from outsiders. I need help from our residents to really demand what we want from this city, demand what we want from our leadership. And you guys have a couple of champions there, but we've got to push an entire council body to do the right thing. We had an opportunity to do the right thing with our budget amendments and prep ourselves for a crisis like this, and we missed that opportunity. And so in many ways, 2020 is going to be a year of working backwards. We're going to be course correcting, and our early decision making during the crisis would not suggest that we're focusing our efforts on the right people. Right now, a lot of attention is being focused on our businesses and the typical people we bail out. We're not focusing a lot of resources on the people, the everyday people who are struggling the most. And so I've found myself operating still as an activist inside of council. The benefit that I get is a vote and a little bit more access to other lawmakers and leaders, and we've been trying to plan regionally, but we still need the public's help to really drive these changes on housing, to drive the changes on our wages. Even now with the relief funds, our stimulus package isn't going to pay average rent in Denver, 1 month of average rent here. And
we
so
gotta-
go ahead. We've
If
got
we-
a lot of making up to do. And so I'm excited to see what we can do.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna set the timer for 2:30, 2.5 minutes. So when you hear the timer go, you got 30 seconds more if you're going that long. But thank you.
You could also put your hands up.
Well, I was trying to put my phone up, but I don't think you can see it well enough. And
Oh, cool.
anyway, yeah, I will. Anyway, so we've got Tony up next, and we'll. Oh, by the way, we're gonna. We've been accepting some questions before this from our membership. You can send questions during it. I think once we get the opening statements done, Carlos will explain a little bit about how people can interact and get questions to us, to these people. But we'll go now to Tony Pickford.
Hey, everybody. Owen, you gave me a little PTSD from the campaign with the timer, man.
Sorry.
That's okay. Good to see so many friendly faces. You all look great. I first and foremost hope that you and all of your loved ones are staying safe and healthy. I think community has always gotten us through trials and tribulations, and that's what's going to get us through this COVID-19 crisis. So good to see you all. Thank you, ORMD. Owen, I do know exactly how many votes our campaign got. It was 35,525.
Yeah.
Couldn't have gotten that many votes without the endorsement of ORMD and just a really amazing patchwork of grassroots support. So I learned a lot, and it was a great campaign. I kind of just want to double down on a lot of what Candy said, specifically that there's tremendous opportunity here. Are there going to be trials and tribulations and pain and some chaos? Yes. But through that, when nothing is certain, absolutely anything is possible. And it's always been possible. But I think when you have a cataclysmic type of event like COVID-19, it just blows the door off of any sort of constraints that we used to have. And so the sky's the limit. And we can talk about it more, but I was thinking about following up with Candy about, since I'm not in the halls of City Hall, I can still rebel rouse as a resident. And so when you're asking for help from residents, I want to know exactly what my marching orders are. And I think that we all do. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that one thing that we've got to be sure to do, and I hope you all have been doing it through this, is really take care of our mental and physical health. However that looks, whatever resources you need, reach out, stay in touch with each other, and advocate for what you need. And I want to let you all know that if there's anything that I need, I know that there's wonderful people out there to ask, and I'm here out in Southeast Denver for those of you that might need any support. So really take care of your mental health, your physical health, reach out, stay in touch. I think as far as Denver is concerned, like Candy said, this is exposed. How much time do I have left, Owen? I just want to check in.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. It has exposed a lot of the inadequacies of our local government, and we have a huge opportunity to change that. And so I'm looking forward to working with you all so that we can really shape Denver into the equitable, vibrant city that I know it can be. The opportunities right in front of us, and we'll get there together.
Okay, thank you. And speaking of the halls of City Hall, I think it looks like Chris Hines is talking to us from City Hall. Looks like he's up there on the dais. Chris, your perspective, please.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris Hines, Denver City Council's District 10, also known as Denver's Perfect 10. I'm a numbers person, so I want to talk about numbers for a minute about just the gravity of the situation. Just looking at a checkbook because I'm old. I don't know. Kids these days don't know what a checkbook is. But you've got income and you've got expenses, and so if we look at income, money's down. Denver gets half of its revenue from sales and lodgers tax, and no one's staying at any of our hotels, so lodgers tax are way down, and sales tax is also way down because we've got a lot of stuff closed. DIA travel is down 94%, and so like people are asking us, can you put off property tax, or like those sorts of things, and we're having to we're having to do what we can. We're also trying to do essential services too, so keep the lights on in the city or whatever. And so it's it's been an interesting conversation, and property tax as an example, that's all accounted for. I mean, that's like 65% goes to Denver Public Schools, et cetera. So let's talk about the expense side, or frankly the need. A third of renters nationwide couldn't pay rent in April. That was a Wall Street Journal article that just came out yesterday. 17 million Americans filed for unemployment just in the last 3 weeks alone. Like the record number before in a week was 800,000. So we're just blowing the doors off of records here. Unfortunately, that's not a record I would really want to set. In Denver, Medicaid applications are up 74%. SNAP applications are up 92%. So we definitely have a lot of a need, and our system was already just barely hanging on, and this demonstrates the need for a lot of Bernie's policies, and how we're kind of screwed for not having it. And I'm really sad to see the withdrawal from the presidential race from Bernie yesterday. And I can only hope that our Democratic candidate will be with it enough to take over from Trump. So there you go. Within 3 minutes.
That's a 30-second warning when you do that. So you can keep going if you need to. Thank you. And I don't see Paul yet. Do we have Paul Casper? Okay. So let's start digging in a little bit deeper. And first let me turn it over to Carlos Valverde from Working Families Project. In your upper left hand, Cindy Brady spot, I think. No, Marsha Brady probably. I don't know. In our panorama here, but for a little tips on how we can get questions in and anything else.
Absolutely. Thank you, Owen. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to be partnering with Our Revolution Working Families. And actually, I think Our Revolution was one of the founders of the Colorado Working Families Party. And so it's been a great partnership that we've had with you all. We're happy to host you on our Zoom meeting. For those of you who haven't used Zoom before, it's actually really, really easy. If you move your mouse, you'll see a little tab that comes down, opens up at the very left. You'll see mute, stop video, participants, and then you'll see a little icon there that says chat. So if you have a question that you don't want to ask yourself, you can just go in there, click the chat button, and you can type your question out. If you would like to speak to ask your question, if you hit the participants tab, a little window will pop up, and there's an icon there on the left right next to yes and no that says raise your hand, and we'll see your hand raised, and Derek or I or Owen, someone will call on you to ask your question.
Okay.
Sound good?
If you can't see that tab, hit the three dots that says more, and it will show those other things if you can't see them.
Perfect.
Okay. And I have got Paul in communication. I'm trying to get the link to him. I'm sorry for my multitasking here. Okay, so hopefully we get him. A second here. If I could get my thumb to send a text. Sorry. All right, let me go on to the next question. I wish I could send this. Wow, what a uncoordinated. Can't do it. All right. So back to the panel. Candy, wanted to dig down into what you were talking about a little bit, because you were.
Oh, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
we
Councilman
got Paul.
Cashman just joined us.
Okay, thank you. And, well, it was a picture of Paul. Okay, so, hey, Paul, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
See ya. Yes, yes. So your spot just came up as you arrived here. So we've been, sorry to put you on the spot. Let me know if you need a minute before you answer, but it's your turn now. So we were talking about, initially wanted to spend this time talking about the progressive agenda in Denver, but we're putting a new slant on it in terms of how the COVID-19 situation is affecting that progressive agenda and how it's affecting what you're doing as council, the shifting priorities, the realities. So we've been taking council members 2 to 3 minutes to weigh in on that. We've heard from Candy, Chris, and Tony Pickford, and now we're up to you.
Good. Thank you. Sorry to be late checking in. I really think while things, budget and available funds are kind of up in the air right now, I think the COVID pandemic is shining light on the importance of a progressive agenda. It's shining a light on the shortfall in our services for our unsheltered residents. It's shining a light on the fact that it seems our resources are not what they should be in problem situations, whether it's enough money available to help people with needs to pay their rent or their utilities, or whether it's a fund for small business. We're in a shorthand position right now, and the current situation has really brought that to the.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm gonna got some new questions now, and on this one we'll try to do let's try to do 90 seconds. Sorry for the timer again, but 90 seconds, and then we'll allow another of the panelists to jump in for an additional 30 seconds if they want. So Candy, you had started this and talking about the way we no longer have a choice, and we had our idea of what we should be doing, but the budget, the COVID-19 gives us no choice, and there are things. Could you go a little more explicitly into some of the top things that you're seeing, some of the specifics that where, for better or worse, your priorities and what you want to be focusing on is dramatically affected by this COVID-19 situation?
Like I said in the beginning, the crisis hasn't changed my priorities at all. And I think now more than ever, housing, justice reform, and environment are still at the top. We have in housing so many more people that will be pushed into homelessness and housing insecurity after this, especially because we haven't even had someone figuring out at the top what to do about these rent and mortgage freezes. You can halt evictions for a while, but when it's all said and done and everyone gets evicted and has evictions on their records, and it's that much harder for them to get into housing with an eviction on their record, and we have a whole collapse of the system, the problem becomes so much bigger, and the tiny slice of our budget that we're devoting, it wasn't cutting it before, and it's not going to cut it now. So I think that we have to fight for a much bigger slice of the budget and a completely different way of doing our subsidized housing. I think it's going to force the country to go back to a different definition of affordable and absolutely a different level of subsidizing. But environment too, this is showing us we don't have to do work the way that we're accustomed to. We can do work differently. Being home and taking a walk and going for a run, all of those things are important. And it's showing us we can do that. And now we got to put our money where our mouth is when it comes to that.
Okay, great. Thanks. And let's keep on the housing part of that for a little bit. Does anybody want to chime in, any of the other three panelists, on the housing piece?
Well, I would just echo what Candy had to say. It's going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out. I would be hopeful, as the councilwoman said, that this might change the dynamic on how we view housing and that affordability will come to the forefront. Unfortunately, I'm looking at a landscape where progressives could not get a progressive candidate into the election for the White House. As much as our needs are, and as as much hard work groups like Our Revolution did. So I know my agenda will be, like my colleagues, to try to get more money into these pots for housing and for homelessness and other similar types of issues. But I wonder if we're going to have the public push behind us to make that happen.
Well, that's a really good point. It leads to my next question, which I'll pose to Chris. Again, on housing, just to complete this thread a little bit, or continue it at least, but are you seeing from your perspective that there is movement on issues that we've been trying to get movement on in terms of dealing with people who are living without homes, for example? Are you seeing movement there as a result of the crisis that we weren't seeing before? Or is it just, at this point, just highlighting the greater need for it and we're not getting the movement? And along those lines, we are hearing about groups that are trying to help. I mean, private businesses, hotels or arenas or whatever, who are offering to help, and others who are saying they won't help. And we'd like to hear a little bit more about who the heroes are and who's standing in the way. But your perspective, Chris, and then we'll let somebody else jump in also.
When I was in college, I did some work for Perot Systems, like Ross Perot. Let's make it happen. Like the guy who ran for president a long time ago. And I worked on this project called The Ascent, and it was an employee development, intranet site, and you had strengths and you had development opportunities. They weren't weaknesses. So I like how you said we've got champions and we've got some people holding us back. They're not horrible people or whatever. So, but anyway, the part of the we do have some movement on housing those without homes. We have a shelter that opened up today. That's at the National Western Center. When we had that described to us, there was Britta Fisher, the head of housing stability, talked about the idea of having between 80 and 100 square feet per person, and so then you could be able to shelter indoors. You could you could have a little bit of personal space. You could have some of the relaxed requirements, some of the reason some people don't go into shelters is because they have a pet or a service dog or a partner, and that doesn't fit into our current models. The photos that I saw from the Denverite article that came out don't match that. So I don't know exactly how to reconcile that just yet. But the talk that we have is really interesting. The stuff that we've been told is exciting, and we're actually doing some movement. We're asking the governor firmer questions, to get the National Guard to help with National Western and staffing, because volunteers have gone way down. But we'll see. Are the words reality or not? So there you go. And I'm out of time.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to jump in to add anything on that?
I think I personally have major frustration with us doing this consolidated shelter. I think that, this is a perfect example of not utilizing resources in the moment that they're available. Every hotel is theoretically empty right now. And instead of having the leadership that we need, taking over those hotels to be able to put people in individual rooms separated from each other to curb the spread, it's almost like we're sending them to a gas chamber in a sense, because we know that the spread would be exacerbated if they were all in the same shelter. And we can't even take the opportunity to do what we should have done with housing. You know, we don't have a housing unit crisis. There are enough units for everybody, but we have vacant luxury units, more vacant luxury units than we have people living on the street. And that's a very similar comparison. But even now, you know, just to see the way that we care so little about our homeless, that we would just dump them all in a consolidated shelter like that, instead of even allowing them to have a designated campsite that in theory is safest for them right now. We're choosing to dump them all in one place.
Great. Well, it's not great, but thank you for your answer. And we could talk about the housing situation, I think, the whole time, but I want to move on to a different topic. But you mentioned, you know, the metaphor, it's like putting people into gas chambers. One place that does seem even more like that, perhaps, is the prison situation and incarceration, whether that's prisons, jails, detention centers, ICE. Tony, do you have a perspective on that you'd like to, in terms of what this is showing about the crisis, you know, the crisis that's brewing in the prison, in these units, and what kind of solutions you're seeing from your perspective?
I mean, honestly, Owen, it's been heartbreaking for me personally, because when you think about the criminal justice system and mass incarceration and the disproportionate effects on Black men, I got a bunch of brothers behind bars in those gas chambers, and the way that this COVID-19 crisis has accentuated the disproportionality in every aspect, especially criminal justice, I go from heartbroken to angry to despondent. And I think, you know, to points that's been made, we need leadership. You know, we don't have at the city level an administration that is trying to get rid of cash bail or get folks out of jails. You know, I mean, we're reading every day about somebody being transferred from Denver to some other prison in confined quarters. And so it's appalling, it's inhumane. And I think we've got to pressure our leaders to speak up, you know, from Mayor Hancock to all the city council members. What is going on in our Denver jails? Yeah. And it's not new. That's what gets frustrating for me, and part of the reason I ran, you know, from Michael Marshall to Marvin Booker, what we've been doing in our local Denver jail system is violation of human rights and inhumane, and it needs to change. I'm sorry, I get worked up about this stuff, yeah. But
well, it's a really good point that it isn't something new. It's shining a light on a problem already. It's making it worse, but the problems have been there. Can somebody else chip in on this question and tell us, because I get the sense that we're in a position now where somebody who's serving, you know, perhaps a 2-year term or a 5-year term, you know, they might be essentially in a death sentence now. But what is going on in the prisons? What action is being taken in for those who are incarcerated in one facility or another? Can anybody speak to what we're doing immediately now to? You know,
there is something positive happening, and I think that we should definitely not lose sight of it. It's not happening for everybody, but there have been major releases, mass releases of people. So we have a historic low in our jail population, because most of the people that we keep in jail are innocent. They're awaiting trial. They can be released, and so we did release a lot of them. And the important thing to note about that is that crime rates are lower. Those are important things to highlight, when we're talking to people about the future of justice reform, we're letting out all the people who we're calling criminals, and we have lower crime rates. But the jails and the releases are directly linked to the homeless situation, because people who get released from jail are typically releasing straight to shelters or the streets. And so those two things are inextricably linked, and solving for one isn't enough. We have to solve for both at the same time, because they're essentially like too deeply linked to rip apart.
Okay, thank you. And we don't have as much time as we'd love to have, so I want to, after my next question and follow up, see if we've got some audience questions, and I know we have a couple that came in ahead of time. But Paul, I'll ask you this, and I know that I think everybody on this panel has spoken quite a bit about climate change and environmental priorities. And Denver started on a pretty ambitious plan to address climate change. But how, has that become a back burner issue, or are we recognizing the interconnectedness with the virus crisis and the climate crisis, and seeing things that are in any way helpful in terms of guiding how we can take necessary action with regard to environmental issues and the climate change issues?
Sure. I don't think it's taken a back burner in any way. I was on the climate task force meeting today, and they're recognizing the urgency of getting their work done. We're looking at, will they end up with something that needs to go to the ballot? Will they not? But we're all looking at the reality of what's going to be happening to the city budget, and what are people's appetites going to be in November for any kind of tax or fee type of initiative. We'll be having an online forum, which is the public outreach part of this, in the COVID age. Rather than public meetings, there'll be an online forum from April 20th to April 30th, where people can get online and discuss with elected officials and the task force and other community members this issue. I think at this point, there's no way it goes to the back burner. Some things will, but I don't think climate change is going to be one. And I guess I'm saying that because of the importance I feel about that issue, that as I say, some things we've got some time. Right now, climate change isn't one of those.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm not glad to hear that we don't have time, but I'm glad to hear that it remains at the fore. Does anybody else want to jump in, Chris? Yeah.
So one of my biggest issues, and what I advocated for before I took office, was about transportation and making sure that we had access to get from A to B safely. We all had the freedom to get from A to B safely, and I'm really excited that we as a city are opening streets to people. We're closing streets to cars, which is what the mayor says. I really believe that speaking of climate change, what we are seeing now is we're seeing what happens if we do actually meaningfully move on climate change. If we stop driving around so much, if we start opening up streets to people, then we not only is it good for the planet, but it's good for physical health. It's good for community because we get out and meet our neighbors, and I think we're seeing a lot of that today. So I mean, this is a pretty horrible cloud, this coronavirus, but I'm looking for silver linings. I try to be an optimist when I can, and I think this is climate change is one opportunity for us to say, this is what we can have. And frankly, this is what we need to do to preserve our habitability on this planet. So I'm glad that we have this pandemic to show us this is why we need to start moving forward even stronger with climate change.
All right. Let me ask a question, both questions that, two questions that came in from our pre-meeting survey. And they are related to COVID-19. So, and I think they can be looked at together. So anybody that wants to jump in on this, please do. So the questioner says, everyone needs health insurance to combat COVID-19. Can we reopen Connect for Health Colorado to anyone who needs coverage? So is this something that is within the city's ability to address? And then related, where can I think it's where can the uninsured get free testing? And are there free COVID-19 teleservices available to them? I believe was the question. So anybody want to jump in on that?
Connect for Health is already open. We don't have any control over that. The state does, but it's open now.
So people can re-up now,
Yep.
and they couldn't before?
Right.
Okay, great.
And the testing, I mean, you can't even get testing with health insurance. So it's not a matter of having insurance or not having insurance. And in many cases, people are sick and they're telling them there's no point in testing. So that's definitely not within our control, but something that we should have thought about very early on in the contaminations.
Okay, I'm gonna check in with Derek to see if you have any questions that have come in from the audience to you, Derek.
Derek, I'm not sure if you're following the chat, but I did follow it, and there are a few questions. And the first question came in from Terry. Terry, if you'd like, I can unmute you.
Yeah, let's do that.
You can ask your question.
Okay. What I would like to know from any of the council members, if you know, is have you calculated what you're going to get under the CARES Act for Denver? You know, the state gets so much, but we are only told in general numbers how much the state gets. It's somewhere between 125 million and 199 million. But then Denver, based on population, gets a chunk. You know, the other cities get a chunk. Denver's going to get the biggest chunk. So that much money will be coming in soon. And I had a question about why can't you take some of that money that Denver's going to get and allocate it to the homelessness situation?
Well, right now, we don't know yet exactly how much money's coming to Denver. And while I agree with you, that would be one area I think is screaming out to be targeted is more money for our unsheltered population. Our budget is looking at taking a big hit, and we're going to have lots of areas to spend that money on. But I'm right with you. Hopefully, we'll get a big chunk to help our unsheltered residents.
And I think there's a responsibility that we have as citizens to pressure your council members not to be approving money for things that are not lifting up the most vulnerable of our residents, because we don't get the decision-making role over where that money gets spent, but we get the decision-making role on the contracts that come in front of us. And if we use up all of the money, allocate all of the money for things that are not going to touch the most vulnerable people before it gets to them, then we're making a mistake. And so we've got to be challenging council members' votes on contracts, on priorities as they come to us, because we're being left out of the decision making on all of that.
Well, that's I know that's one of the questions that we had for everybody, and I don't know, we'll get another audience question, but just something to think about, and we might close with this when we close, is that's really good advice on what we can specifically do to help you. And if everybody can think about how activists like our Revolution members can help, and what we can do. And Tony, I think your perspective as somebody who is active in the community and doesn't have a vote on council, on how people can affect change from that perspective. But think about that in terms of your closing statement, sort of, and let's see if there's another, Gary, I'm going to ask you how we are on time in terms of should we be wrapping up?
Yeah, I mean, thanks to the panelists, we're going a little over what I had set as an expectation, and I appreciate them staying. Why don't we try to wrap up in the next 2 or 3 minutes? And
Okay, well, is there another good audience question, Carlos?
There was some questions around how many seats it would take to create a progressive council. I think that was more theoretical. We could probably talk about that amongst ourselves, but I think Derek had a question that he wanted to ask verbally.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, it's regarding that, and so right now our state house races, there's only gonna be 2 primaries, and 2 seats are going unchallenged. And I was wondering how we, as you know, our revolution as working families and having groups that we agree with, like DSA, or even like Padres or Sierra Club or all these other groups, how do we work with both you and all these other groups that want to get people in, to get more people like you on council and to get your help? I'll give you a good example. People we've endorsed before wouldn't help our revolution candidates that came up that we endorsed later, and I feel that splits a lot of our power, and you know, really makes it to where we only get like 1 win 1 year and it doesn't connect. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on what we can do to help you get people in by either working with you or working with other groups.
So if I can ask you panelists to maybe, I think that works well with the question that I was posing for you to close on. You know, how can we get a stronger council, a more progressive council? What can we do to help you? What can people do from the outside who don't have the vote? If you can address Derek's question, those questions in 30 seconds each, or thereabouts, 30 seconds to a minute, and then we'll have to close the panel on that. But I've got Candy still up first there on my screen. So. Yeah.
I think it's about paying attention. You know, once you get us in there, you can't just leave us alone and not watch the council meetings and not watch the way people vote, because you may support somebody who doesn't continue voting the way that you would expect them to. And come election time again, you might be looking to replace their seat. So I think it's about paying attention and staying actively engaged. Every Thursday we get our consent agenda and our bills put up for what we're voting on Monday. And I think that the public needs to be telling their council members how they want them to vote, what they want them to call out, because everything is a block vote, a yes, an automatic yes, unless we call it out. And we need you guys to tell us what to call out.
Great, thank you. Next up would be Chris.
So I think, you know, I think it'll take some time to figure out why Bernie did not prevail. One of the things that I've heard is that he won the hearts and minds of young folks, but they didn't vote. And I think that's the one of the big challenges. Like I'm hoping that, I mean, I think I won partly because young people showed up for my election, and I'm moving forward with the policies supporting the people who live in my district. The median age of District 10 is under 37. I'm hoping that they vote. So the best way that we can have progressive agendas and policies moving forward is to get those young folks to actually show up and vote.
Yeah, great, thanks. And Paul?
You know, Owen, I think the key is activating the public voice. You know, we're looking now at how we increase public participation in government, be that through registered neighborhood groups, or maybe there are other channels to do that. There's 13 of us on council. There's like 720,000 people in the city right now. And I got to figure there's a whole lot of great ideas coming from people who aren't sitting on council right now. Be as aggressive as you can, hammer on us, let us know exactly what it is you expect from us. I think we've got the basics of a good progressive council. I think we have 7 votes in a lot of situations. but you need to be as aggressive as you can be and make sure, as Councilwoman Sotobaka said, that we are doing what you elected us to do.
This is challenging because every time each of you speak, I've got 6 follow-up questions I want to ask, but we don't have time. But Tony, your perspective from where you sit or from where you walk and stand, what do you have to share?
Yeah, 2023 is huge for Denver. The mayor's seat will be open, both at-large seats will be open, and to Candy's point, we have to stay diligent because voters will vote you in and will vote you out. And so there's a huge opportunity in 2023. I would suggest we start planning now. And it's not about finding the candidates, it's about being sure that there's solid campaign staff infrastructure in place, ideally staff infrastructure, people of color, to help our candidates win. There's a lot of talent, and to Councilman Cashman's point, a lot of great ideas out there and great candidates, but we need to start planning now and start getting that campaign staff infrastructure in place to support, and I'll call it we can't technically call it, but a slate of candidates for 2023, and use the campaign finance reform changes that we've made very strategically to our advantage, because we'll have access to capital that we've never had before. So
great. Was that it? I didn't want to cut you off, but
no, I'm just excited about 2023 because of the opportunity. And I look forward to starting that planning process yesterday.
Well, thanks. And I want to mention, since you mentioned campaign finance reform, I can't resist. Just pointing out that in addition to Candy being a champion on that issue, Tony was also a champion on that issue, and Derek, and me. But the 4 of us were all on the petition committee for the original initiative. And if you look at our other 2 panelists, Chris and Paul, they were 2 elected officials who opted in at the earliest possible moment, I think even earlier than possible, to opt in for public funding of their campaigns in the future. So hopefully we do see, that's one of the things that helps bring change. Thank you so much to all of you panelists. We could easily spend 2 hours with you and not be satisfied having enough to hear from you. But this is tremendous. Feel free to stick around. We'd love to have you. And we're going to get into some nuts and bolts things about moving forward on the campaign. So I'm going to turn it back to Gary, and thank you all once more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, Nita's up, so I'm going to start the screen share again, and Nita will talk to us about the need for delegates.
I unmuted myself. I assume everybody can hear me okay. Hi, everybody. And I want to thank our city council members and Tony as well. Y'all have made a big difference. I live in Denver, and thank you for everything you're doing. So this is a heartbreak. I mean, it's hard to even talk about when Bernie suspended his campaign. And people deal with it in different ways. I mean, there's grieving, and people grieve, showing anger or withdrawing, or we just all have our different ways of dealing with it. But I try to look at Bernie because I think he is the most incredible role model in terms of how to handle defeats. I mean, if you've ever read his book, I don't remember how many times he lost public office before he finally won by something like 22 votes or something. And he doesn't hold grudges. I mean, he just doesn't. He gets in there and keeps fighting. So again, everybody has to handle this their own way, but what I'm going to urge people to do in this is to follow Bernie's lead. If you trust him and if you feel like he is a person of integrity, then please follow his lead. And what he said, I mean, I'm sure all of y'all read it, but he said, I'll stay on the ballot in all remaining states and continue to gather delegates, while Vice President Biden will be the nominee. He said that. We must continue working to assemble as many delegates as possible at the Democratic Convention, where we will be able to exert significant influence over the party platform and other functions. And then he went on later to say, please stay in this fight with me. Let us go forward together as our goal continues. So that that for me is going to be sort of my mantra. So how does this play out in Colorado? We still have elections for delegates in our congressional districts, not at the state level. That is a National Democratic Party rule that we cannot change, and so it is what it is. So we have to deal with that and know that at least we will get our delegates at our CD level. And so I urge people to really get to know who these delegates are these candidates to be a national delegate and cast your vote. So people then might ask, well, since Bernie's withdrawn and he won't be the nominee, why does this even matter? Why does it even matter if we've got delegates? And it's again that we need to take delegates all the way to the DNC convention, and they will be the face of Bernie's movement and will give a voice to his platform and to his policies. So that is still so crucial. Also, we're going to be electing representatives for our DNC, for our platform, for our rules committee. So when people feel like they want to, leave the party, which it's easy to want to do, and again, I cannot tell anybody what to do. I urge people to please stay and work within the party, and let's get these delegates to the convention. So going forth as volunteers, what do we do? Certainly, we have local candidates and local initiatives that we can work on. But in terms of Bernie's campaign, I am on the national Slack team, as many people are, and they have not made any official phone calls right now. They did stop that once Bernie did his suspension. It doesn't mean that they won't be doing them again. They're going to regroup and figure out, and we'll know more on Monday how to move forth on calls. So I think, just stand tight on that. I mean, a lot of us have knocked on doors, we've gone to other states, we've made phone calls. And so I think, just kind of sit there and wait, because we will get some guidance on this. And ORMD also, we will have that, and then we can make sure that we get any of that information out to people. So if there's any questions, otherwise that's basically what I have.
I think if folks have questions, you can probably just unmute yourself and ask them.
I don't have a question, I have a statement, so I can wait for somebody who has a question.
Yeah, and we are going to give a chance also, I would say, when I'm finished, to talk about the delegate process and some people maybe that are in our revolution that are running.
Okay, sure. I can wait.
Any questions? Doesn't seem like there are any, so I think we can move on to the next section.
I think, Owen, you were going to talk a little bit about the delegate election process now?
Sure, yeah. So we're down to, as Anita said, down to one pool of delegates. We had 3 initially, statewide at large, party leaders and elected officials, and then congressional district conventions. So the first 2 are typically elected at state, but they won't be elected for Bernie because he's suspended his campaign for party rules. So all we have left is his congressional district delegates, and people will be getting a ballot on Monday. The convention and assembly will be virtual, and actually they'll really just be on SurveyMonkey. So delegates will get a ballot on SurveyMonkey on Monday. They will, I suppose, vote by acclamation on their ballot because there's only one candidate, I think, for CD1 running for Congress. I believe that's also when we will deal with our school board candidate, the State Board of Education candidates. But in terms of delegates who are running for Bernie or for anybody else out of the congressional district, everybody who gets a ballot, every delegate will have a choice to pick their preference, presidential preference. So even if on their last ballot they said their preference was Warren, say, and even she was already out of the race, they can now choose whatever they want to afresh. And so a technically Warren delegate can choose to be a Sanders delegate, and whoever you choose, it'll populate, 20 or 30 candidates, perhaps. I think for Bernie's case, it's 20 to 30 candidates from the congressional district for 3 seats. So we've got 3 seats coming out of the congressional district. Denver is allotted 3 for Bernie Sanders, and they're going to take the 3 highest vote totals of the voting, and people will be able to vote for 3 people. They'll be able to vote for 3 candidates, and the 3 with the highest vote tallies, with the adjustment that their ideal balance of gender will be 2 men and 1 woman. If there's somebody who's binary gender, they will, and they're in the top 3, then they'll be in, and whoever is 3rd would or 4th would be out. So they also look for balance in issues like, are people involved, are there disability candidates? Are there minority candidates? Are there veteran candidates, I believe? Are there labor candidates? A lot of different criteria that they look and try to make sure every piece of the party is represented in our delegates. But the main thing we hear about is the gender breakdown, that they're going to have shoot for 2 men and 1 woman, or a non-binary in those top 3. So I think that's the nutshell there. And, the top delegates will go on to the national convention. The top 3 will go on to the national convention. We don't know if that's going to be real or virtual, but whatever it is, it's going to be very interesting if it's virtual. And so much gets done at these national conventions, in terms of caucuses meeting with incredible speakers and a lot of good material. Caucuses like the Women's Caucus, the African American Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, the Disability Caucus, the Veterans Caucus, the LGBTQ+ caucus, on and on, and Native American Caucus. And it's an incredible opportunity to bring all those groups into the forefront and share really valuable information with delegates to take back to their communities. So I hope that that kind of thing continues to go on. These conventions, aside from being a political party in a smoke-filled room, they're not smoke-filled rooms anymore, but at least we don't have access to them. But they are very educational, and they're an opportunity to really pick up a lot and to impart a lot. And I think we're hoping that we can get Colorado folks there who can bring some of the good stuff we've done in Colorado and some of what we're doing in Denver. Our election system has been a model, I think, for people across the country in this crisis to try to find a way to make sure everybody can vote without endangering their health. And Denver has that in place, and other people are scrambling to model themselves after us in a hurry. So that's the nutshell voting process for for the CD1 assembly.
Thanks, Owen.
We will still have the state assembly where we'll vote for, not for delegates, but for DNC, Democratic National Committee members, and for electors for the final vote, the people who go and sign the vote from our Colorado. Okay.
Yeah, I see we have a couple questions. I think Cleo raised her hand first, and then Tony. So why don't, I'm assuming those questions are for Owen, but if not, let us know who they're for. Cleo, because you go first with your hand up.
Yeah, I don't know who put my name for CD1. When I got the list, unless I missed it, I was only a delegate for at large, which I'm not anymore. Who saw my name for CD1?
That was,
well, we had some iterations here. Several people were involved. I'll take responsibility for kind of misrepresenting you, Cleo. I'm sorry.
No, you're not misrepresenting me. I wish I could have run in CD1.
Yeah.
But I was assigned, I thought, for just national.
Yeah, you may have been. This is based on a little bit of a chaotic input process, so I don't think you have to
Well-
worry about your name being misplaced somewhere officially.
And also, let me add that, you know, the process has been changing over the last 24 to 48 hours. So when we were starting this process, we were looking at ORMD people, you know, Metro Denver folks who are running for delegates. And that was in any category. So I think your name got in because you were running for delegate and you're in Metro Denver. And, you know, now it's limited down to CD1 and we weren't careful enough. And I think I'm partly to blame for that also, maybe largely to blame for that.
No, that's
Can I just-
okay. That's okay. That's
Can I
fine.
just throw in, there is a way to confirm this. Yeah, because maybe it is again clear that you just signed up for at large. But if you go to the coloradodemocrats.org and if there is a link there that you can see who are the people who are running, and it shows it by congressional districts. So
Yeah, and I try to run for both, but when I saw the
Right.
list,
Well,
I was not
yeah.
on CD1. That's okay. I'll look.
Okay.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Well,
Cleo,
yeah, we-
I'll look, I can confirm it for sure for you after
Yeah,
the
we'll
meeting.
double check.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, thanks.
Carla, can you unmute Tony? Or Tony, I think you can unmute yourself.
Cool, yeah, thank you. Owen, when you said something that just sparked a thought in my mind when you were talking about Denver's model for the voting process and how we've made it pretty easy for most folks to vote, which I agree. I'd like to see us take a look at re-examining the process for how candidates get on the ballot, because especially with the impact of COVID-19 on gathering signatures, you know, how could we sort of transform that process? Could it be electronic? Could some signatures be gotten by mail? So I just wanted to put a little footnote that I think that's something we should consider is how do we re-examine the process for how candidates access the ballot?
That's a really important point because there are people who are not going to make the ballot this year largely because of COVID-19, because they could not put volunteers in danger's way and go out and collect signatures. And so they stopped at you know, we were on lockdown orders, I believe, you know, we're pretty close to it before the deadline for turning in petitions. So it was pretty hard to keep going. And that's going to play out in ballot issues also. It's going to be much harder to get an issue on the ballot. I don't know how anybody's going to get an issue on the ballot in this climate, but it's a really good point.
Yep. Okay. So while we're on this topic, I just wanted to thank the ORMD council members who are running to be national delegates. And if we do have other delegates in the to the assemblies and the convention and the audience, these are definitely people to consider. We also wanted to give anybody else who's a delegate or going to run for a delegate, national delegate position, a chance to introduce themselves and maybe say a couple words briefly.
Can we,
Yep.
for this, can we stop the screen share and go back to where we can see the speakers?
Sure. Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah. So just raise your hand if you want a moment on the stage here. Nita, okay.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. Yeah, I am running to be a Bernie Sanders national delegate for CD1, and that's probably all you need. I don't need to give a speech.
Okay.
I just, yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Radhika, where'd she go?
Owen has his hand raised.
Okay. Are we raising actual hands? I was raising an actual hand. So I'm Owen Perkins, and I am running for Bernie Sanders national delegate in CD1.
Veronica?
Do we have anyone else?
All
Now we
right.
also, go ahead, Radhika.
So was somebody else speaking? I'm sorry, did I speak over somebody?
No.
Okay. So, there are so many different ways of organizing, and person who has knocked the most doors, made the most phone calls, done the most, not just this cycle, but for years, is Leah Lynch. So I'm going to be dropping from running for national delegate and putting my strength behind her. And I want to announce it and stuff. And gentlemen, I'm really sorry. I love you too. But, Cleo, I also thought that I didn't realize, I don't know that you're running for CD1, but Nita, was the one woman. And I feel like we need to elevate her voice. She has always just always put her, led with her best foot forward and just done all the work. So I'm going to be dropping out and putting myself behind her.
Okay, thank you, Radhika. Also, I think we may have some people in the audience who are going to be running for Democratic National Committee. If you'd like to introduce yourselves and just raise your hand. Anyone here?
Repeat what you said.
For you.
You, Rosie.
Who?
Yes, I am running for DNC member.
Yeah.
And yeah. Do you want me to say something?
Yeah.
Okay. So, why am I running? This crisis has made so clear the hollowness of our system that has appeared to be a system, but it's basically a patchwork that's barely held together. And from all the way from my immigrant experience to my policy background to being able to stand up and speak loudly and clearly and try to communicate and persuade people about the issues that affect common folk. Right now I'm in a household with no income. This happens because we as a system did not grow all the strengths that we've had. We have let so many people down, so there's going to be so much grief. And I'm running because there's just this fire in my belly about how we need to change as a system, as a party, and not just be a mirror image to the Republicans. Yeah, so I'll take our voices there, and I'm going to put up a good fight, and I'm going to try and see if we can't get a few more Bernies.
Great, thank you. So we'll move on to the next topic, which is talking about what ORMD plans are for the next few months, and that is to focus on endorsements for down ballot races. Let me share this screen. Oop, I'm gotta go back one. Okay. Let's see. Oop. All right. So this slide here just kind of gives a quick rundown of how the ORMD Council is prioritized, what we're going to be doing in terms of focusing on races. One of the things that we're doing now is trying to coordinate with other Colorado chapters of ORMD to see if we can come to a consensus on a candidate for the Senate race. We expect there may be more than one progressive running for US Senate, and we think we can get more impact across the state if we can come to an agreement on one candidate that would be supported by all the ORMD chapters. The other thing we're going to be doing soon is just reviewing the track record of previously endorsed incumbents and doing another endorsement, kind of not requiring all the interviews and evaluations that we normally go through, so that we can kind of expedite endorsements for those incumbents who have really worked actively on the kinds of issues we support. And then we're going to be looking initially at the contested legislative races in Denver, which, as I think Owen mentioned earlier, there are only two, HD6 and SD31. And depending on the number of volunteers we get to help us with the endorsement process, we'll then move on to consider races in other metropolitan areas, as well as the region race in CD6 and the Board of Education race in CD1. So the question then is, what can our members do? Or we're hoping to get volunteers to help us research candidates, participate in the interviews that we do, and then to work on summarizing findings. I'm getting a little feedback there, I'm not sure from where. And in post-endorsement, of course, we'll need volunteers to work on supporting endorsed candidate campaigns. And what we do is typically identify somebody who's going to be the lead coordinator between the campaign and our volunteers for each of these races. So if anybody is interested in working in this area, please let us know, either by reaching out to somebody on the council or through email to us. Any questions on the down ballot endorsements that we're going to be looking at?
Well, we've only been talking about Denver really so far, but we are Metro Denver, and we are looking for people outside of Denver to help launch the endorsement process in their community, right, Terry?
Right.
Yes.
I was just typing.
Yep.
Can I have a minute?
Yeah, Terry, you can take a minute. I know that's just in terms of the bandwidth we have. We were starting with Denver.
I know, but
we definitely want to move on.
Okay. I just want to tell everybody that
please.
I'm going to be actively recruiting volunteers, and I'm going to be actively recruiting some volunteers on the west side in addition to Denver Central. So just expect the phone calls.
Okay, great. Thanks, Terry. And I think what we're going to do now is Carlos was going to give us a quick questionnaire on who our Senate preferences are. Carlos, can you take the screen and do that?
Absolutely. I just took the screen from you, and I am going to do that in 1 second here. Let me get it all up. Okay. Okay, folks. So if you have a cell phone, or if you can open up another window on your computer screen, we have a couple of questions that we wanted to run by you. Go to www.menti, that's MENTI.com, and that's right on the top of my screen. Hopefully you can see it there, and put in the code 707505. And we have a couple of questions. We want to do a quick poll with you all, and these things will update. This screen will update as soon as you start responding. So the first question there is, what are your 2020 political priorities? What are you most passionate about right now going into this 2020 election cycle?
Wait, where did we have to sign in? Sorry. Mentimeter.com?
Menti.com, it's on the screen there.
Menti.com, it's right on the top of my screen.
Oh, Menti.com, okay. Oh, what was the code again, please? 70?
707505.
707505. Okay. Thank you.
I cannot, this is Cleo, I cannot reduce the screen to be able to vote, but I'm, if somebody is taking notes, I'm going to say number 1.
Okay, this one's actually a ranked choice, so you can name your top 4 if you'd like.
What I
Okay.
did. That's what I did.
Okay, so it's looking like 4 people have voted so far. Defeating Trump is number 1. Defeating Cory Gardner is getting up there.
2.
Okay. Taxing the rich is now tied with Cory Gardner.
Get down from there. What are you doing?
Okay, so keep your phone or your screen open. I'm going to give you guys a couple more seconds to get your votes in on this one. While folks do that, just so you know, we are working with the Secretary of State. Many of you, it's the worst kept secret around, but Working Families is also putting forward a ballot measure for paid family leave. We think it's a travesty that our governor is trying to privatize this. And so we want to just take it to the people. We think the people will pass this. And we're working with the Secretary of State to figure out how we can actually gather signatures in a moment of social distancing. It looks like defeating Cory Gardner is creeping up a little bit. But still defeating Trump is by far number 1. So let's go to the next question. And we want to see who your preferred U.S. Senate candidate is.
Oh, Jesus.
Looks like Romanoff, Lorena. You sure nobody wants to vote for Hickenlooper? We were going to put Gardner on here, but. Okay, so looks like Andrew. Oh, Lorena's creeping up. Okay.
Creeping up.
Lorena has 4 there. Andrew has 8.
It's a landslide.
Low voter turnout, I think, on this one.
We're waiting for the mail ballots to come in. Boy, how about these states that allow you to mail up till election night?
Cool.
Okay, so those were our quick polls. We want to just test the water, see how folks are feeling right now.
Great. Thank you, Carlos. And it's just about 8 o'clock, so I think we probably are at the end of the time that everybody's allotted for this. So I want to thank everybody for joining tonight. Thank the panelists, especially. I know some of them stayed into the meeting. I really appreciate that. I'm sure we all do. And I want to thank Owen for excellent job as moderator. And want to thank Carlos again and Working Families Party for
Gary?
providing the platform and the questions for us. Yeah. Radhika,
Can I take 1 second?
Sure, of course.
So Public Citizen is doing this push to try and get, so one of the things I forgot to mention, DNC, one of my biggest things is going to be Medicare for all. I've been working in for universal healthcare for quite some time, and that's going to be my biggest issue. But in Denver, we have Public Citizen is doing a local effort to get our local electeds to try and come out, because other cities have come out. Even though you can't affect or change policy, you can support Medicare for all. And this time, it's so crucial if we can get them. And I know Aurora, I've already talked to them a little bit. They have some interest. And Laura, who is here on this call, is part of that team. And so is Cleo. We're trying to lead into this, getting our electeds to say, yes, we will support Medicare for all. I'll be happy to send a separate email, and I won't keep you guys now because it is super late. I'm sorry.
Oh, and there was a quick question in the chat about when the video of It's 8 o'clock. Downtown Denver's going wild. I can hear it outside my door. Oh, and there was a question about when the recording will be available for this meeting.
I've never gone through this with Zoom, so I'm not sure, but hopefully tomorrow, if not sooner. But not
great.
sooner. Hopefully tomorrow.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks again, and I think we can end the meeting now. Hope
Okay.
to see everyone again soon.
Bye.
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 Bye.